Welcome to And It's Live, the podcast which dives deep into football's most iconic seasons, stories, and what ifs. If you love football, history, tactics, and nostalgia, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell, and drop us a like on YouTube so you don't miss an episode. Hello and welcome to part 3 of the main event's final season, 2013-14, the history of the Champions League, or partial history of the Champions League. It did go on past this season. I am Martin in the chair as always, and joined by my two friends, colleagues, experts, fellow time travellers. Adam Thornton, how are you, sir?
Good, thank you. Yes, it does go past this season, but that's all boring and modern as far as we're concerned. So we will be happily cutting off at that point. But looking forward to knockout stages of this, our final one.
Too close for genuine perspective, the kind of perspective I like, which is around about 20 years. Davey, how are we doing?
Good, thank you, lads. Yes, nice to be sad, but bittersweet, I suppose, to be getting to this stage of the show. But then we've an exciting new one coming up, so that's something to look forward to. And with that sense of accomplishment that we have, in fact, faced up to our Everest, crossed our Rubicon, and any other historical cliche that you wish to name.
Is this the longest show? I know obviously we've had time capsules and stuff which are episodes of something, but in terms of like telling a story, how long was Dominant?
Dominant was 55 episodes, so this is longer than Dominant.
I think it depends.
Advocat years would have been longer.
No, it was 61. It depends if you count managerial series as one big long series, because it's been going.
I want this one to be the longest, so I won't be counting that.
Right, no, individual series, I would say yes. Individually named series, yes, it was. I think so.
We might beat it with the Premier League show because we're starting from 4 episodes a season for, 25 years? We might hit a ton on that one.
We'll smash that out. Anyway, gentlemen, shall we start with...
We'll be doing this conclusion for that in 3.5 years' time, folks. That's something to look for. If the planet still exists, we'll be here.
Yeah. Shall we start with Arsenal, just for old time's sake? Again, as we talked last week, a couple of weeks ago, whenever Arsenal were on our group show, failing to get the result they needed in that final game, which meant they went through in second place, which meant they were liable to get a tough draw, which is exactly what they got. Milan a couple of years before, where they get pumped and then came home and nearly got it done. They had Bayern Munich the season before and they get pumped and nearly got it done. And they get Bayern Munich again, home first this time, Adam, and all the hits are there. Chesney gets sent off for a foul. Penalty kick is missed in the first half. Get out of jail. Places going bananas. Blah. Bayern just show their class in the end. Couple of lovely goals. You just bring in Thomas Müller just to come and do that kind of thing, just to finish it off. Bit of a moment in Munich, not for the last time in this particular run. Will do enough to see them home, but it just felt, even though the cup would be won by Arsenal, and then I think we had a nice little kind of cup run over the last few years of Wenger's time. This Champions League story just felt so tired, Adam, by this time. He just knew every beat that was going to take place.
Yes, totally agree with everything you've said there. I think this is why hindsight is great, because it gives you that separation, I think, from what's happening at the time. Because I remember being, I think I've said before, had a liking to certain teams and managers in the Premier League, but I've not been a fan of I would never say I was a fan of a club down there, but I was probably for a large period of time more favourable towards Arsenal than anyone else. And I remember at this time thinking, I'm doing okay, you've got this and that. You look at some of these lineups and stuff, and it's just so far removed from what it was before. I think everybody knows that, but at the time, people are saying it sort of dulled their expectations, but they're going to get fourth. You go through some of these lineups now and you're like, is it almost impressive that they were still managing to get fourth at this point? I don't know if that's
that's fair.
Being too harsh, but it's just, but at the time I was thinking, oh, we'll get fourth and then next year maybe do this and maybe get third. But with the benefit of hindsight now, you're like, these are rough. Some of these lineups, some of these signings are rough. There's an element of doubling down on what you want to do, but then there's just bringing in players that aren't good enough, and then also players that maybe don't even fit that whole ball playing style that you're looking at. So I won't be disappointed to see the back of talking about how Arsenal have declined. No surprises here in terms of the tactical approach by Bayern Munich. 2-0 win, complete possession dominance. Philip Lahm in this, I think he had a really good game. I got some extended highlights of this the other day, and he's now starting to become that central midfielder.
This was the big story, wasn't it, of Pep's
Really
first season,
interesting.
wasn't it?
Really interesting because we've spoken about some fantastic players over the years who adapted to become something different. I think one of the first ones that we probably spoke about was Marcel Desailly and his move. But without being too ignorant about it, it wouldn't be the first centre half that can play in defensive midfield. That's a pretty well trodden path. Even striker to centre half is something that we've seen. But to do something like this and be one of the best fullbacks in the world, and then the manager to come in and say, Philippe Lam, again, I thought maybe early 20s. At this point, he's not at all. He's what, 30, maybe close to 30, if not quite there. That's a lot, I think, particularly again because this ridiculously demanding manager, fitness, style, all that sort of stuff that Bayern were frenetic under Jupp Heynckes, and before that they were just sort of like any other big team, kind of Real Madrid or a Juventus type team that, yes, they'll have some great players and things, but the collection of great players are what wins you these games rather than a sort of structure. So for all of that to be going on and to then define a position on your own and become one of the best in the world for that period of time in a second position, I think at the time was mad. Now players play their centre fullbacks, spend a lot of time in midfield, inverting in their in possession. Even fullbacks will play in midfield anyway in certain situations. It's all so much more fluid, but I think it's really important. This is the last big tactical shift I want to discuss on here, and we've not done a lot of it in the last 10 years or so of the show, purely because, like I said, there hasn't been a lot. It's been tiki-taka, the rise of this sort of gegenpressing piece, and then that's all we've really had, I would argue, since the early 2000s. So I think for this, being able to play right back, being able to play left back, and then basically completely transforming yourself into a central midfielder in such a highly structured, highly technical team, I think was terrific. And I think in this game, particularly, I think he dominated that first leg. Just fantastic, deep control in the build-up against Ozil, who you can argue he's not exactly going to be a frenetic player, but he's a quality player. And to dominate that, I think, was fantastic. Second leg, Arsenal, again, to that point about, do they really have this Wenger style now? Because they tried their best to press, didn't really do it. You've got Podolski and Giroud, no offence, great players, love both of them. Not exactly high-pressing machines, so they sort of lack consistency. And Bayern just ultimately kept them at arm's length and got them through. But the whole Philippe Lam piece, and I guess what we spoke about Dani Alves revolutionising that position 4 or 5 years earlier, and he did. And we still see flying fullbacks now. It's probably less seen now than it is for the guys like Philippe Lam, and I think he's the trailblazer in that, and probably doesn't get anywhere near half the credit or the plaudits that Dani Alves did for it. So a bit of flowers to him, I think.
Also, David, just talking about Bayern's midfield, Toni Kroos, fantastic goal to set Bayern on their way that night at the Emirates. He'd gone, as many of this Bayern team would do, to have a very enjoyable summer in Brazil, and then off to Real Madrid to start the next big stage in his career. And I think along with Thomas Müller, I don't think there are any German footballers with more to show for their career than those two. Just a fabulous, gifted, cultured player, but one who doesn't hog the headlines maybe like others. Müller, for example, just maybe a bit more of a character about him that people like to play on. His goal's brilliant as well, just an absolutely typical Thomas Müller goal. How does he continue not to be marked in a box? But Kroos, just, is it possible to say he went under the radar? I hope you know what I mean. He just doesn't get the noise that is actually probably due.
Because what he does is unspectacular but absolutely vital in the side. A little bit like Lam, Adam mentioned there, that Alves was more explosive and was charging and scoring a lot. I think one season at Sevilla he got 23 goals. That's stunning. But you're absolutely correct about Toni Kroos. And always I think it's interesting when Toni Kroos played in England, it was always interesting because it always sparked off a debate, didn't it, about why don't we produce that type of player? And it has been something that England have lacked, just that metronome. That's someone that Xavi was also another one that they admired very strongly because of this. The tempo setter, the person who's always available to receive a pass. Now, you put him in that midfield with Modric and you win Champions League after Champions League because their ability to dominate a match, their ability to make sure that Madrid were able to do exactly what they wanted in matches was unrivaled. And an absolutely fabulous player, a wee bit more of a character perhaps than he gets credit for. I don't know if you know that he's a massive darts fan. and goes every year to the World
Yeah.
Championship at the Alexandra Palace. I've seen him interviewed on the television there, whereas when people are stood behind him dressed as Banana Man and St Trinian's girls, which is a slightly surreal view to see this immaculate football player who was so admired. And it was interesting with this Bayern team because Thomas Müller famously has said that the first 3 months of Guardiola, not the first 3 months of the season, but the first 3 months of Guardiola was the hardest that he and the other players in that squad had ever gone through, because they simply didn't think they would be able to do what he was asking them to do. And at times it would lead to frustration, and in training they would begin to almost defer back to what they had done, thinking you're pretty good players anyway, but we just won the treble. And Guardiola was like, no, you are not going to play like this. You're going to do what I want you to do. And Thomas Müller has said, there were tears in the dressing room at times because people were like, I'm never going to get this. I don't understand it. And then when it did get through and when it clicked, the football they played was absolutely incredible. With Arsenal, there are very few terrible. I went back and had a look over the whole campaign here before we came to this today. There are very few atrocious losses in these latter stages, right throughout the Wenger era. Very few where you go, they should absolutely have beaten that side. That's a total shock result. But it was just the situations that they kept getting themselves into, and they never seemed to learn from that. You would think that this year of all years that they might have said, do you know what, lads, let's go all out to win this group, because we've seen what happens to us in the past. And they never ever seemed to grasp that.
Difficult group,
they
but they did have it in their own hands in that
the last game. And it's not the first time that happened either, where they were in that situation, even at home. Previously, it happened when they needed a result in the last night and couldn't get it, when they were already through. Adam nailed it there, that there are a lot of good players in this team, a lack, I think, of great ones. And they were always that bit short. They were a team who could finish third or fourth in the EPL. That was their level. They were a team who could get through a Champions League group, but as soon as they met anybody from the next rank, they were going to lose, and they would and did lose. And it never changed. Arsenal's consistency throughout this tournament is almost laudable. If you're into that, you knew what you were going to get from them. I think by this stage, their support knows what they're going to get from them too, Martin, and then expectation becomes reality.
Just so
and
flat,
this is what we see.
I'll stick with you, Davey. Olympiacos Manchester United, Davy Moyes' Manchester United, for a few months yet. A 2-0 defeat in Athens, or Piraeus. And then this Robin van Persie hat-trick at Old Trafford. Wayne Rooney's involved a lot as well. They're everywhere. It's just one of those manic nights that works, and they come back. We've talked a lot on recent vintage seasons about how 2-0 just isn't worth what it once was, perhaps, as a first leg lead. You have these kind of chaotic second legs. Watching that again earlier, so much of it resonates with just the last 10 years of Manchester United, really, in Europe. They are capable of that kind of madcap second leg charge, comeback. They're in all sorts of bother, so many fine messes that they find themselves in, and manage to somehow kind of scrape by. It's been an interesting facet of their history post Ferguson. A bit of an echo to Ferguson's time as well, because the Old Trafford comebacks are hardly a new thing, but it seems to be all they're clinging on to, not grinding professional consistency.
Well, we're in the end days of David Moyes here, even if we didn't know it at the time. And United had been very poor by their own standards at that time. And there was a lot of pressure on Moyes, and he was not handling it well. And in Greece, it's a performance we've seen in Greece and Turkey from British teams in the past, Martin, where they go there a little lacking in confidence, and it's a bear pit and a good side up against them. A side they should be beating, but a good side nonetheless. And they capitulate, and United capitulate in that first leg, and it could have been worse for them. They looked bedraggled. They looked like me if you stick me in 40-degree heat for an hour and a half by the end of that match. However, I've been critical sometimes of the United crowd. That's because I think in tight, tense games, they get tight and tense, and I think they often communicated it to their players who were then affected by it. What they are very good at is a back to the wall, nothing to lose, head down, let's charge, lads. And aura is a big thing. Aura is a thing that I think is very much a part of that stadium. And at this point, it's absolutely there. I think it's still there now in the Europa League, Martin, for United. I don't think it's there in the Champions League for them because these bigger teams don't buy into it. Whereas teams of a lower level, they see the badge still. And we've seen that in the Europa League for United famously in 24-25 against Lyon. But they just go, we've nothing to lose, let's go for it, lads. And it's your proper swashbuckling, head down Manchester United and they have a very good striker in Robin van Persie. He was a wonderful football player and he delivers with the aid of an excellent Wayne Rooney that night, and they get the job done. And Olympiacos melt a little bit. They're not expected. They're up against the still champions of England, the famous Manchester United, several recent Champions League finals. And they wilt in that heat. They were not the first and they would not be the last, but at this level it became rare and rarer.
Adam, one of the most interesting, intriguing ties of the last 16 was City-Barcelona. City in free-flowing mood. They're going to win the title, not without some help from Liverpool, obviously, the final stages. But they were impressive, and this was pitted as, you know, these two free-flowing attacking teams, and City stopped. I suppose they reacted. They at home were a wee bit more cautious, a wee bit more defensive. Game turned on a foul inside the box. Di Michaelis gets sent off. Messi rolls in the penalty and had another one later on. And it's just, they don't have this belief yet, and it's going to take a long time still before they do.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's very much one of those games, isn't it? Again, you can talk about all the money and the expectation and English football pulling away as a dominant force, etc. This one to me felt very much like big club versus little club on a European scale, or even on a top end European scale, shall we say. But naive, yes, they are emerging as powerhouse domestically, completely untested this level. We spoke about them very cautious anyway. 4-4-2-ish, kind of fairly in the first leg at the Etihad. I think it was Yaya Toure and Fernandinho as the midfield two players, absolutely. But you think about the Barcelona midfield three.
That's really interesting me, Adam. What is the thinking there? Because he's ex-Barca. And you mentioned, look, I'm good. Fernandinho is very good, but you can't leave this 3-on-2 in there because we'll get murdered. Genuinely, you know, the thing about it, these are two excellent midfielders, right? And I really rated both of them really highly. But
that's the thing I find so fascinating, because we are laymen, and you only need to go onto Twitter and see certain games and lineups come out, and you think that team's going to get battered, and we only have 10-20% of the context of anything, which I think a lot of people always forget. So there must be thinking against it. But if you look at the lineup, it's a 4-4-2. Pellegrini, guess, again, you could call it 4-2-3-1 if you wanted to. I think this one was very much a 4-4-2 because it was Kolarov and Jesus Navas on the wings. Now, Jesus Navas was a winger at this point, but obviously would famously go back to be a right back. Kolarov is a left back playing up there. You've got Zabaleta and Clichy as the actual fullbacks. So you could argue there's six. It's a 4-4-2, but you've got two sets of fullbacks. So it's very, very defensive at home to Barcelona. You're sort of dealing with it on the wings a little bit, but then you're leaving yourself open because you've got David Silva in behind Negredo. It seems a bit strange to me. I'm looking at the bench. They've not really got much else there. To be fair, they've less got Nasri. Javi Garcia, yes, could have potentially come in. Maybe it's a circumstance thing. I don't know. But yeah, back at that lineup, I was like, oh, as much as Fernandinho's great, and yeah, he's got lots of running power, it's going to get passed around a little bit when you've got Fabregas, wasn't it? Fabregas, let me check. Fabregas, Sergio Busquets and Xavi Hernandez in the midfield, but then Iniesta dropping in the way that we know he does. So they're three, if you like, if you want to be kind about it. Fernandinho, yeah, and David Silva just going to get clumped when Iniesta comes in. Alexis Sanchez and Messi playing as well. They're all six of them really are going to naturally kind of want to drop in, and only really Alexis Sanchez would be then going beyond. So yeah, interesting one, David, and it kind of plays out in that way. It's one of those ones you think, oh, that looks a bit weird, and then yeah, do it. I think Pellegrini was we've said this before, too conservative in hindsight to be a manager at the top end nowadays. I think we see that by him not really being a manager at the top end nowadays. Maybe it's just one of those things, very useful at times, but when you're getting to the latter stages of competitions like this and the expectation is building, I'm not quite sure he really was that guy that could open up and be flexible in the way that some of the other ones did, and I think that sort of plays out here for me.
Charisma, isn't it? It's sometimes when you get to that stage, he's something a bit special, and he's the engineer, wasn't he? We're just going to wrap up the English stuff before we look at the other 4, because they're quite high scoring drubbins, really, the other ones. Go to Turkey to play Galatasaray. Torres scores early. They get one back away from home. Samuel Eto'o, I forgot he had gone back to Mourinho, trusted lieutenant. He goes early at the bridge. Gary Hill later on. Stuff.
Absolutely perfect. Exactly what you want to do in a European performance over there, especially in the away goal era, Martin. You get the early away goal, pressure's all in the opposition. They get a bit ragged. They do get one back, and fair enough, but Chelsea are happy with that. They'll take them, and then goal early in the first half, goal late in the first half. Job done. Everyone knows it. Galatasaray are not scoring 3 goals they would have needed at that point. So yeah, not really a lot to say on this one. Galatasaray were a reasonable team, not a great one. So that they obviously had the previous Mourinho connections in there with Snyder and Drogba, but not a side that should be knocking out Chelsea, and they never threatened to do so. So again, Adam's point in the last one, there is experience, and this is a really seasoned European club by this point. They know what they're doing in these situations. And like, I think if I was running one of these courses, I would take this tie and say, this is what you do in a European performance if you're the bigger side.
Adam, on the face of it again, pre-match, Milan versus Atletico Madrid looked interesting. Possibly a big test for an Atleti team that were having a good season. They won 1-0 in Milan. Diego Costa with a late-ish goal. And then scored early again in Madrid. Kaká pulled one back. So it's still, as you might expect it, before half-time. And then go before half time, 2 more in the second half. It looks very comfortable. Looks like it is a doing 4-1, right? That 90 minutes for over the piece. How comfortable was it, in fact?
Very. Yeah, I think to kind of point that we spoke about here, the Simeone effect is in full swing here. Point that I guess isn't really spoken about at these times when we talk about this sort of change in style. And for me, around about this point, and certainly coming up, it was going to be Atletico and Leicester. Remember how fascinated people were, myself included, at this point, about teams that could win games of football and win leagues without dominating possession. It was all like, I remember it happening to myself at the time as well, and I was like the ball, and because you're sort of ingrained from the whole Barcelona piece, and probably even before that as well, like Cruyff and various others, that good football was, or successful football was usually on the whole about having lots of the ball and creating lots of chances and all that sort of stuff. And I just remember this period coming up and the absolute surprise on Twitter and my friends and all that about, God, they shots and scored 2 goals and then just sat back and broke on the transition. I'm like, that's really interesting. And that is what they did. I think they did a really good description earlier on about Atletico. They never attempted it. It wasn't they could play. Like we spoke before about Koke and a couple of others. They had the players to do it. Centre halves were decent on the ball. The fullbacks more centre half than but they could play on the ball. They just never done it. They wanted to keep the middle of the pitch absolutely sealed, because that's the area most of the goals are scored from. So it does come from that, absolutely. But they prioritised that space, or controlling the space over controlling possession, whereas Guardiola and your likes was, if I've got the ball, no one else can score. So theirs came from a risk or a caution point of view as well. It was just a different approach. I found that really fascinating. It was, I'm going to, same as Mourinho, Inter, I think as well. I'm going to control the spaces that I want to control. If I don't have the ball, that's fine. I'm going to control the space, and therefore the ball can't get through. So I understand the logic, and I think it's absolutely sound. They were deadly from set pieces as well. Rapid vertical counters, hugely decisive. There's a game coming up, header against Barcelona for set piece. Yeah, it was all about the collective effort, and it was a bit of a throwback at this time, as bizarre as that sounds. Up against a Milan team who we spoke about before, it's like an old bloodhound, like getting to the end, and they're just like on going, and it's like, oh, here we go. Coming up against a team like that, this just rips apart a team that's got no legs, no energy, no shape, really. Almost like the worst thing that can happen to them. I think that plays out. It was just very efficient, very dominating. Diego Costa, we will come on to in the Premier League show. Obviously, we spoke about here getting 3 goals over the 2 games. Yeah, it's just sensible. really sensible team to come in at this point, a really I can't say that word. Antithesis? What is it? Yeah. Antithesis to what was happening Europe, and it was a change, and I remember being, wow, this is interesting. I think this game sums it up. Yeah.
What I took out of this tie in particular is that Adam mentioned there that we hadn't seen a lot of innovations in football, tactical innovations or whatever. Here was the complete death of an Italian football mantra, which is you just get some good players, and then you can build parts of the team separately. We've got a good defence, so we'll graft on a couple of good attackers. We'll be fine. And that's what this Milan squad is. It's a group of good players who've been put together. Well, no, that's not going to be enough now. You're up against these sides who are machine-like. Bayern are like this, like that, in that there is a system. Everyone has a part to play in that system. Everyone has a role. They will work you when you don't have the ball and you do. I would argue Italian football has never really caught up with it. In the main, you get the odd side that has a burst, Inter or whatever, although Inter are very much a throwback side as well. And here's a change here where, seen it with Borussia Dortmund before as well. This is a side who have a very purpose-built machine where everyone has a specific designated role on and off the ball, who know where they need to be. And if you're hoping to play a more off-the-cuff traditional style against this side, it simply won't work because they will have answers and you will not have answers to the questions they can pose you. And that's what we saw.
David, Schalke were smashed by the BB's Benzema, Bale and Cristiano. 2 goals each. They were 6-0 up at 90 minutes. Plus Huntelaar, bless him, getting a goal back in injury time. Another 3 smashed in Madrid. 2 on aggregate. Verratti popping up with a goal, bless him. Hard to tell, I suppose, because, Schalke punch, but should not be troubling scorers anywhere. But this is quite a demonstration of power, and I guess we should maybe have known what was coming.
Yes, we should have. Are not a great side, and I think getting in and getting through their group is success for them to reach this stage. You couldn't ask for a straw at this point, but Madrid just ceaseless beating in that first leg. To the point that Huntelaar gets that goal back and those ironic cheers from the home support, which is never a good sign, is it, if they're doing that to you? But
who's still there? It's 6-0 down.
It's Germany, but
I don't no chance, man.
Germany, but I know what they're like. They're all still chanting as well at 90 minutes, but a lot of irony involved in it. This is just a vastly superior team who are in form as well. And you mentioned there who are warming up for a real crack at this front three, though. When it was on song and together, which wasn't always the case, was virtually unplayable because you had everything in it that you needed. But you also had, as well as the pace, the skill, the rate and the strength of it. These are 3 huge guys. They can bully defenders physically as well as with all the other more skillful attributes. And they did so. As a throw the towel in, he's already dead one. And the second leg, they play well within themselves because why wouldn't you? And they still win 3-1, still very comfortable. For Schalke, it's maybe a bit stranger because it's a German side, but there is a gap between certainly the top 2 German sides and the rest. In European terms anyway, there often is, and there is this season. But for Schalke, this was now a club who you couldn't see the mistakes that had been made, but they had been made by this point, and they'll enter a spiral that ends up with them, of course, in the second division in Germany, which would have been unthinkable at this point. But they get battered. Just get taken apart by energy, pace, power, skill. It's devastating. And you're absolutely right. Look, and while I don't think any of us, even at the time, would have said, Schalke are a great side, when you're going in 2nd-6 by a German side in the Champions League in Germany, then people have to start taking you seriously as potential winners of the tournament. But people were, that front line. You had to. Again, Benzema, I think only really in his latter years began to get the praise that he deserved, I think.
And so much expectation about his early years because he was so quick and so devastating. This guy's going to be brilliant. And there was this kind of, I suppose.
There was this, but he was beloved of Florentino Perez. and it was made clear to manager after manager, you can do what you like, but you're playing him. And obviously, Ronaldo came in, you didn't need to be told, but you were playing him as well. The thing about Benzema that people sometimes is his work rate. He was such a great. That's why Ronaldo absolutely adored playing with him, because he was such a good foil. Anyone to play off, because his work rate was superb, his ability to win the ball was superb, hold the ball up. And when you then stick to 6 foot plus behemoths who can both dart up the pitch at rapid pace, well, if they're all in form at the same time, you get duffed 6-1 at home. It's that simple.
Okay, there's any huge points to make about Zenit St. Petersburg and Borussia Dortmund. I'll whiz through that. Dortmund were 2 up in 5 minutes in St. Petersburg, ended up winning 4-2 in that first leg. Lost the home leg to them, but who cares? They were touching on. And the final last 16 game is Paris Saint-Germain in Leverkusen. A full win. Germany following that up with a 2-1 win. And last season, I suppose, about them finally kind of through and said, right, they could be what their money should make them. This was another step towards that. Neatly takes us into the semi-finals then, Adam. Quarterfinals, sorry. They are tied with Chelsea. 1-1 at half time in Paris, and then Luis own goal. He is prone to games at either end of the pitch, of course. 2-1 looks like it's heading that way. Disaster at all for Chelsea with the away goal, etc., etc. And an injury time Pastore goal seems to built Paris Saint-Germain a cushion to take to West London. The end, it is not enough. Really enjoyable game. Raul, Andrea Schürrle, I think comes on actually first half substitute. He's so good at taking the ball first time. That goal looks so simple, but it absolutely isn't. Get Chelsea that lead. I think rattle the bar twice in about 2 minutes. Kisses at least one big chance, maybe another. They could have put it to bed. And then Demba Ba, about right place, right time. Bundles at home with a few minutes to go. Chelsea go through. I think Mourinho runs down the track again to jump on that pylon in the corner, and there's a hint of desperation around that, like Renai was the future once, and trying to kind of recapture that thing. It doesn't quite come off. Chelsea, of course, they go through, and that's their focus this season. I think that's fair to say. Adam, Saint-Germain's failure, we will see this again and again and again until recently where they finally won that, notably that 2017 nonsense against Barcelona where they had a 4-0 home lead to take to the camp. They scored, I think, when they were 3-0 down, so the goal still being in play, 2 minutes to go, 5-4 ahead, tie. A 5-3 ahead, I think, maybe, and they lose 3 goals in the space of 5-6 minutes or whatever it was into injury time. There's something that Paris Saint-Germain just cannot shake off, and possibly it kind of starts here.
Yeah, those weird things, because you look through the team and you think, I quite like this team in terms of the individuals. I mentioned last time Laurent Blanc is there. Javier Pastore was someone that I loved in Palermo. Palermo had a pretty good couple of years just before this when he was there. I think it might have been, was it around at the same time that Kyle Lafferty was there? I don't know if they played together. From Palermo to PSG seems like a massive jump now. Probably still was at that time. But he was a bit of a throwback, I guess. I kind of recall him like a floaty number 10. It was already sort of becoming a bit obsolete at this point. But a good team. We spoke about Blaise Matuidi last week, and I think he really helped them. They were still considering...
I loved Blaise Matuidi. Just apropos of nothing. Thought he was brilliant.
Yeah. Again, this whole piece about teams still not quite, or clubs, I should say, still not quite finding their identity. Man City and then PSG coming. They sort of set up in a 4-3-3. A really good midfield. Thiago Motta as your kind of anchor. Got Matuidi as the sort of ball winner on the legs, and then you've got Marco Verratti, who I think we spoke about, didn't we, last season? Kind of number 8 ball progressor, whatever you want to call him, and then just so much power up front. They were a bit more direct than... certainly more direct than they are now. It was very much focused on Tweedy bringing the ball forward, Lavezzi doing something to get it into a position where Cavani and Ibrahimovic could score. Not to this how Chelsea were, but certainly in the midfield. I think you start to see this Mourinho. Maybe I think we've agreed, or I've conceded that I was a little bit harsh on Madrid in terms of where he was or where he would become potentially. But Nemanja Matic and David Luiz in the centre of the pitch, it's not the one for me at all. That's just it's not even a complete reluctance not to play. It's just, I don't know. Not me.
It's over-egging the point.
It's not necessary to do something like that in one of these games because you're not playing a ridiculously amazing team. So yeah, got issues with that. As we said, it'll be the last time I mention them on the show, certainly. Thought that Verratti had a really good game. I thought the whole point of Chelsea here in the first leg anyway was keep it safe, Matic and Luiz, and then you've got Hazard, Willian and Oscar, good players. I think certainly behind the three big players, but I think Verratti was just getting through there sort of very easily, getting the ball up the pitch. Then we said the directness of Vezi and Matuidi was a decisive factor. I think despite the lineup there, I think Mourinho definitely got caught a little bit between, will I just completely double down on that defensiveness? Doesn't really make sense when he had those three players playing in attack. I think he just got kind of caught between two stools and they got punished in that leg. David, I think years ago we might have had a disagreement or a heated discussion, shall we say, about away goals. See, when it worked, I thought it was great because it was basically from 32 minutes in here, next goal's the winner, whereas away goals go away and it's like... And I think that's why I think it is really interesting, because if you're the home team in front of your fans and you've went away and you've got that goal, it's great. I completely understand the opposite position where it can become a bit of a double negative. But in this circumstance, when you get the goal before half-time and you're like, driving force now, because every one of PSG's goals count double from that point. But if we score, we're through. I think it just added a nice dynamic, but it wasn't always the case. And I don't think overall we've really missed it, but I just think
that would be my kind of argument. Have we really missed it? No. The reason it was brought in was fair, because when European football was first started, you would be often travelling behind the Iron Curtain, or you'd be travelling to countries where it was very difficult to get any footage of the sides or even any local info on those pre-internet days. So, and there was also the risk that you would be nobbled by authorities, by cooking your food, by a referee. So it was brought in because it was a lot more difficult going away from home. Now it isn't. And I just don't, I think then it adds an element of gameplay that isn't fair, where you can, and you have to calculate. I've long bemoaned on this show that British teams didn't seem to understand it and didn't factor it into their calculations. I think it is just fairer to say, right, okay, you just need to see who the better team is. Where it might be an argument, where I would maybe concede, is these days of growing financial inequality, that there would be an argument saying that if a team on a budget of 60 million is playing a team on a budget of 600 million, then it's clearly a very difficult thing for them to go away and do something. But I do think it adds an element of the. I don't think if you're coming at it from a purely fairness point of view, also it means that the team in the second leg has an advantage, because if it goes extra time, they've got another half an hour to score this double goal. So, but a classic Joe Son, Martin. You were spot on. Towards the end, was given it large, and this was the start of what would develop into a massive second leg knockout tie neurosis for Paris Saint-Germain as a club, which outlasted coaches and players, but was always there right up, as you said, until it wasn't.
Yeah. David Moyes and Manchester United, they gave a good account themselves against the reigning European champions, Bayern Munich. And at one stage of the tie in the second leg, just on the hour mark, it's locked 1-1. Obviously 2-2 overall. United taking the lead in both games. But then, yes, Munich have gears that Manchester United don't have, and Müller and grabbed a couple in the space of 8 minutes that put the tie to bed. But again, kind of repeating themselves, United maybe over-punching in Europe in a way they simply just were not getting anywhere near at home. And Munich doing enough like they did against Arsenal, but maybe not quite as impressive. And next week, listeners, they're going to get their reckoning. But yeah, just too much for United in this particular iteration.
Yeah, I think you summed up perfectly when you said that they had gears that United didn't, because this is a tough, close-fought match for 150 minutes. And then in that deciding last half an hour, Bayern just find something more. They just find that bit more quality that they have across United and they. One of the interesting things for me was I remembered this, so I went back and double checked. United fans and the British press, there's a bit of an uproar about something David Moyes says, which I think is a theme in his Manchester United, because he said afterwards in his post-match interview with would it BT at the time, or was it still Sky? I think BT at this stage. Who knows? But
no, Sky last year.
Sky, yeah,
sure.
Right. I thought it was Sky. I must admit I had it in my head. But he said, yes, well, we're disappointed, but we gave it our best and we've enjoyed being in the Champions League and we're looking forward to trying to get back in it next year. And people were seized upon this and said, what do you mean you've enjoyed being in it? You know, you're not Gillingham in the 5th round of the FA Cup. You're Manchester United, for Christ's sake. You've gone out at this round. That's not good for a club like Manchester United. And it was used as more evidence. And by the way, I mentioned we're now into the deaths. It was used as evidence of he simply doesn't get this. He is not big enough for this job at this point. And I think that it can be really interesting when a manager gets that position. Anything you say can be taken and used as evidence for the argument that you are not the man for the job, and he certainly did. But I think it was a creditable performance when you think of their struggles domestically. But they simply have that other level at the clutch moment that they'd had before. And, you know, we've seen, you know, United aren't exactly packed with quality, but their gameplay, in want of a better term, was excellent. And they were great moments. The United teams of just picking their moment to do something. They didn't have that in this side. And it was a side that was fairly directionless domestically as well, let's not forget. So, yes, I know about Bayern, because I don't think any of us thought at this point that they wouldn't be there or thereabouts, to use the precise geographical term that gets used in football. But you're right in a way that there comes a point when you can't say, you know, after these 2 matches, they played within themselves and they had other gears if they needed them. There comes a point where, are they playing within themselves? Or is it a case that they've just been a bit closer to the two sides than we maybe thought they were? That's an interesting discussion. Well, as you say, in the next round, it'll become a bit clearer.
Yeah. Adam, one of the most interesting quarterfinal. Real Madrid, Dortmund replay of the semi-final last year. Madrid out for revenge, and yet again we have this team that is developing and will continue to develop after this season and after we show. Real Madrid still excellent performance at home. This tie should be overdone. No point in watching the second leg, but 34 minutes. 37 minutes. Borussia Dortmund are 2-0 up, and we're back in this being on the balance, back into your away goal chat that, you know, feel that next goal is important. It doesn't have Madrid hang on. What happened in that second half? Did away goals play a part in Borussia Dortmund maybe caught between two stools? Because if they go leather, as they absolutely would now, for example, in that's nothing to lose, could do that. With that in the mind, that look at that attack, look how well they counter-attack, look at the pace and power in which they can do it, and they'll puff. Did it just become a bit stalemate in that second half?
Yeah, first leg, Lewandowski was and Gundogan missing. So they kind of Madrid let Dortmund press in that first leg, and just huge emphasis on, with Bale one side, Ronaldo the other, and Benzema in the middle. They just smashed them on quick, getting the ball forward quick, wide overloads, hitting them in transition. The early goal Bernabeu absolutely does not help anything for like that. They were in that for we mentioned, well, players getting signed by Dortmund that can't do what they want, and I think Socrates was probably one of those as well. He looked terrified to be every time that Madrid came forward. Second leg, I remember what's at the time actually, and this was the whole atmosphere, the yellow wall and all that sort of stuff was right at sort of start of being an actual thing. I think they thought that would through. Lewandowski was Royce sort of played in a little bit deeper, number 10, I guess, second striker, whatever you want to call it. He takes that first goal very well. Second one, bit more of a kind of counter-attack. And he sort of arrives in the box, Lampard-esque, I would say, to slot it home. There's a penalty as well, I think, for Madrid that Di Maria sees. I should say. And they sort of flipped it around a little bit. I think Dortmund were the ones that then were the aggressors, and they pressed a bit more. I think having Royce in there really helps that for them. He's a sort of tempo setter there. Mkhitaryan should have scored to make it 3-0, to be honest. So it was, what would we say? It was, I think it was like I always say a game of two halves, but it was a game of two legs, as bizarre as that sounds, because it was almost like the role reversal. And they just never quite managed to get it over the line. I think it was one of those last gasps of gegenpressing with Klopp, if you like. Here, that second leg, let's just go all out and be high tempo pressing, one touch moves, all that sort of stuff. And it didn't really quite happen. But on the flip side, I think you're seeing Madrid growing up a little bit more here in terms of Ancelotti and maturity. I get she would obviously bring that. Being 2-0 down, almost 3-0, there wasn't a huge amount of panic. They sort of just let them come at them and punch out, really. If not a goal on the counter-attack later on, I don't think I would have been hugely surprised. It was kind of a very grown-up, mature performance, especially after almost going 3-0 down, penalty, all that sort of stuff. I think it would have been really easy to just collapse into themselves. But yeah, it was very, very high. And I think was, pragmatic away from Madrid. I don't think Ronaldo played the second leg, if I remember, I was watching it. So that's obviously going to have an impact on them as well. It would have been Di Maria that he'd have come in for. Who knows what might have happened? It might have been comfortable had he been playing, because he's very much at the peak of his powers. But yeah, I think probably on the whole for that first leg showing deserved to go through, but the second leg was a kind of similar path for Dortmund.
Stick with you, Adam. Barcelona Atletico was the other quarter-final, 1-1 in the Camp Nou, and then aforementioned Koke put Madrid ahead early in that, like a bit of screwball scramble, really. Ball bouncing in that box. He's finally there to kind of head it home, and it's like, this is set up for an absolute mammoth kind of game. No more goals, but tension all the way to the end, coupled with the fact that all three of them actually went the distance in the league. I think Barcelona and Real were tied on points in second, third, just behind. And it's great when that happens. You can weave these two domestic and European narratives in with all these clubs. But obviously two teams that know each other very well. And it was tense night. I remember watching this as a very kind of detached, thinking, right, everything's going to set up with this early goal. Anything could happen here. And breathless.
Yeah, I don't think I would have thought that was it when Koke scored. I don't have thought that would have been game over. Really a huge betting man, but I can't not putting more goals on after that. Again, to labour the point on as well. You're like, God, I mean, they're firmly in the driving seat at home, etc. But one more goal when it's level, and then Barcelona have the advantage because it's just another goal, especially with the firepower that they have, and we spoke about there when they coming in as well. Very. I think, as it would be, given the two that we spoke about. Costa went off, I think, the first leg, which obviously
ramification
was a little bit of a ramification for them, again, similar to the Ronaldo chat a while ago. Who knows how might have been even more comfortable, because it was just David Villa just up top for
poor rubbish David Villa.
Second leg. This was the time as well that I sort of lost it a little bit with Barca. Fabregas was playing as the false nine at this point, and like, that goes too far, even for me, I think, in terms of positional playing stuff. I deeper in the pitch. We spoke about the Mascherano piece. We even spoke about, if you want to extend it, the Philip Lam thing. I understand that. For me, it's just overkill when it's someone who's obviously not that type of player up there, because you want desperate needs or want to just have ball players everywhere. Or ball can trust, I guess, to do this, maybe more of the situation. Yeah, even if Alexis Sanchez come on in the second half, he wasn't great for Barcelona overall. A lot better than he was for in England. He was United. He was decent for Arsenal. I just want maybe that little bit of penetration in behind. Atletico might have had Pedro on the bench too. So yeah, who knows? Just think of it, especially when it gets to that 1-0. You've got to go and chase. The fact that you've then got Fabregas up there doesn't really, and Neymar as well, doesn't, you think, okay, let's get a little bit more direct in there. But again, flip point of that is Atletico going 1-0 up at home and having to defend in compact space is just perfect for them. So it could have been absolutely academic. So yeah, it was a bit of a cagier one, this one. Like I said, I didn't expect it just to end in the way that it did. But yeah, fair play to Atletico, and through they go again.
Their season continues to roll. That'll do us, gents. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
Cheers, David.
Pleasure as always, guys. Thank you.
And listeners, we have one more episode to go next week. One of the biggest shocks in Champions League history, one of the most telling games of football for what the next decade would bring, what injury have done to the final, and a holy grail is finally reached. Until then, bye for now. If you enjoyed the show and want to help us grow, please remember to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. On YouTube, search for And It's Live Podcast. We've got new deep dives, drafts and breakdowns dropping every other day.